right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. It's time to have that conversation, but we'll start off with the Daily Nation and the Standard to get a feel of what my guests think in terms of the headlines there. And then later on, we'll have a conversation on their Madaraka Day expectations. And the last Madaraka Day, 2023, the president centered on quite a number of things. Housing was one of the biggest conversations. Then agriculture, technology, health. And then there was the launch of the Hustler Group loan. We'll take a look at that and then talk about the expectations coming through for this year's Madaraka Day happening tomorrow. We'd like to hear your views as well. At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. Let me start by introducing my guest from my father's right. Alenga Torostad is here. He's a policy and governance analyst. Thank you very much for making time. Shiko Kihika, Executive Director, Tribeless Youth. Asante sana for making time. Arnold Maliba, Strategic Communication Advisor at the UDA. Thank you very much for making time. And Josephine Wanjiru, Youth and Gender Advocate. Asante sana for making time. So we'll start off with the Daily Nation and the Standard. They're also the same headline, almost. Hustler Jet, the Dubai connection. Friends with benefits, who paid for this visit and why? As the president reveals Emirati connection in American visit, questions emerged of a sweet deal, the need for public disclosure, and how far friends can go in the context of interstate relations. On the other side, which is on the Standard, they talk about tough questions are being asked after the president claimed the luxury aeroplane he used for the state visit to the U.S. was paid for by his friends. Who are these friends? What was their interest in the trip? Was the law breached in entering into such a deal? Why was KQ dragged into the matter earlier on? Alenga, are we making a mountain out of a molehill? Or are these legitimate questions?
Trevor, it's interesting to have such a discussion as the travel of a president to a foreign country on exorbitant costs at the expense of, we don't know if it is the taxpayer or truly the friends. The explanation that the trip was funded remotely by some friends to the president comes post facto, so we do not know if that is really, really true. But as it were, in the earlier conversation, the president or the people around him never denied that they had actually spent from the public purse. So then we ask ourselves, what is the nexus between that expenditure and what comes to the country? A lot of conversations have been in the space that the president came back with goodies. And then you want to ask yourself, what are those goodies? Sending Kenyan police officers to Haiti to fight a cause they don't understand is a goodie. Negotiating a road construction by a private company from the US and having it managed by that company for a number of years until it is given back to the country is classified as a freebie. There is a lot of questions and very few answers in the space.
Okay. Shiko, are you concerned about this conversation, or should we be focusing more on what we got from the trip rather than the expense of the trip?
I think, as we all know, the president has a tendency of taking so many trips but giving very low returns to the country. And for me, I think the biggest concern at this point is I have never seen a presidency that works with friends with benefits. So it makes me raise a lot of questions, because what benefits are we giving to the Emiratis? And I know for sure his benefits are funded by my taxes. So that's a big question for me. But at the same time, I do believe that the party, or rather the government now, has really failed, or rather is saying too much but giving too little in terms of what is the impact of this trip and how does it benefit me as a citizen or a taxpayer. But at the same time, I don't know. I just don't. I've never seen a president who comes to defend his trips. Like, you're coming out in the open to tell me how, oh no, I did not use the 200 million that you people are saying, I used 10 million. Why should we believe you?
Should he have stayed quiet in the face of 200 million allegations?
No, then give us evidence, because we know you've lied and you always lie. So give us evidence to prove that you actually spent the 10 million you're talking about. Because once you say you spent the 10 million, you're also telling us your friend literally sponsored your trip. So what 10 million are you spending in between?
So in your mathematics, if you spend 10 million in the trip...
That math is not mathing at all. The 190 came from the friend.
Maliba, what is your take on this trip?
I think the conversation we're having is healthy. Yeah, because we gave ourselves the Constitution 2010, and with it, of course, comes Article 10, prominently where public participation is, including what we are having here. No one ever said that public participation was going to be positive or rosy. Even when you see people throwing chairs at each other, that is public participation. And I welcome this particular conversation. What I might not really like, and I don't have to like how people do or rather exercise their rights. That's the truth. That whereas I might not like what Shiko says, I will defend her right to say it. So public participation is like the gospel. Somewhere in Philippians, Paul says that people might preach gospel out of envy, strife, or even competition. But at the end of the day, he tells Philippians that the gospel is being preached. So when the people do public participation out of strife, out of politics, out of whatever reason, it's still important that this important constitutional principle is being exercised. This is what we signed up for when we took up the Constitution 2010, that we will be questioned. As to the question of now what's being referred to as the hustler jet, first of all, government has resources in very many ways, but I'll just count but three. Number one, taxes. Number two, we get grants. Number three, we get loans. I can go to number four, which is where the hustler jet falls. We call it appropriation in aid. You know, we've been... It's a lift. We have actually been given planes for free as a country. The president has simply been given a lift. Trevor, Rais amepewa lift. Na tunapiga nduru lift. And we have been given as planes, and we have accepted them. So let me just go very fast. What I think we need to be focusing on is the benefits that come with this. I took time and did fleshing out of financial benefits that come with that visit. And by the time I got halfway of that particular fact sheet, it's actually on the US website. You can actually just go and see the Kenya website. It's there. Actually, I had counted up to 15 trillion shillings by halfway. 15 trillion shillings money unlocked, unveiled, and consolidated. You cannot compare that level of immense benefit. And the others, of course, that we've not spoken about. I have simply, and you just take time. I know we are a country that is just the same way we don't like paying taxes. We are like the Greeks and the Italians. We are very tax averse. That is why out of 24 million people that should be paying tax, we've got about 6. We also don't like mathematics. It was optional a lot of times. In fact, the problem is that mathematics keeps on showing up in different ways. When you're in primary school, it's called mathematics. When you go to college, it's putting on a lot of clothes. Either it's quantitative techniques. It gives a lot of management mathematics. It has got so many ways, calculus and everything else. So mathematics will always come with us. And that is where the problem is. That no one, for example, of all the people making noise, including we in government, have not sat down and quantitatively analyzed the fact sheet. The Americans did very good work. Take time and look at that fact sheet. And I'm talking about, I have just done, and I have not actually exhausted it because I was a little bit tired and this phone could not do a lot of much calculation.
You don't like mathematics?
No, I tried, Trevor. The rest of these people have not done anything I'm talking about. So I'm talking about, by the time I hit halfway the fact sheet, if you just flesh out, it's equivalent to 15 trillion shillings. Money that is coming, number one, to government. Number two, to the private sector. Number three, to the civil society. And one of those things that this visit, if I were either working for a CSO or a private sector, I would use that fact sheet as a strategy paper because, number one, we now have got the Public Benefits Authority, the Public Benefits Act, the PBO Act, coming into effect after 10 years. If you look at how this visit unlocks resources that initially weren't there, it's actually immense. Okay. If you look at the money that is actually coming to startups, to businesses that exist, take time and read that. You will actually realize that whereas this public participation we are having about the hustler jet is important and is constitutional, it does not even have the honor of untying the laces of the shoes of the benefits that come with this visit.
Okay. Josephine, are we trivializing this conversation by simply looking at the trip costs and not the benefit of the trip, or are there legitimate concerns from Kenyans of how their taxpayers' money is being used?
Absolutely. I think we're trivializing everything that has gone into, first of all, even getting the state visit itself, getting the invitation, and what has come from it. You know, like Maliba says that he's bad at math, but 15 trillion to 200 million is a very thin ratio according to expenses versus what you're getting. And there is Shiko saying, you know, like, Ruto is a liar, and probably what he's saying here is a lie. That's the equivalent of saying if a priest was saying this, it must be true because everything that he says is true. You cannot, you know, have the fact versus attacking the person, saying that this luxurious jet, a donation from his Emirati friends, is actually a lie. It might be true. Have you considered it being true? And the state visit, it might be true, for sure.
Yeah, for sure,
and
it might be
true. And
yeah,
you know,
really.
the funny thing is, Royal Jet have not even given their statement on whether or not this was from the Emirati friends or paid by himself and the taxpayers' money. So it's a she said, he said situation at this point. And the only thing that we have factually true is that whatever he came back with is so beneficial to us, especially myself as a youth and an entrepreneur. And now we are making this discussion all about what he spent going, and this US state, mostly the expenditure that he had in the US state was done by the US government. And now we are only talking about, guess what, he spent 200 million going. And now we're not talking about he has 15 trillion coming. And that's what I would have loved to see on the Daily Nation headlines. You know, what are we getting as the youth, as entrepreneurs, as women? Not about a Dubai connection, 200 million to this conversation. And that's what I think.
Okay,
yeah.
perhaps just to bring this debate
let's get
I just want to buttress her point before she...
Let's get a reaction from Shiko first. Shiko was adversely mentioned on this.
Sure.
Yeah, because I'm just sitting here. I'm just sitting here and I'm asking myself, when you say might be, it means it could be a lie, it could be true.
Yeah, exactly.
All right? So when the government, and I always say taxpayers' money are being spent again and again to hire so many communication people, strategists like Maliba, and so on and so forth, right? When the president is the one who's coming out to defend himself, don't you all feel like there's more than what meets the eye? Again, when we talk about the youth benefiting from this trip, this is money that has not landed in our accounts yet, all right? These are promises. We're not talking about what we're giving to the US in return, okay? We're also not having a conversation about the current finance bill that has done away completely with the Youth Enterprise Fund. We are not having that conversation. As a youth, as an entrepreneur, that should be the conversation you're having. Because if this basket is not there, where are the common young people going to get security to loan the monies that they need to start up their businesses? We're not talking about the taxes that are about to hit us when we're having this conversation. Because if these 15 trillion conversation, and I love the way UDA people love numbers in trillions and billions because they get them that much when they're looting from us. But then a common person does not feel the effect of that because it's just a number of zeros. They don't even understand what that means. Because for bread right now, bread itself they will not be able to afford.
Okay. Maliba, you wanted to jump in.
I just needed to buttress her point. Number one, I think what she says is that she goes back to the old adage that in God we trust. Everybody else must bring data, including Shiko. Mm-hmm. So when we get into he said, she said, we are simply not really being serious on the fact that if the alligator comes out of the river one morning and tells you the crocodile is dead, you cannot doubt the alligator because you don't live in water. Here, it's the president himself who is telling us. This is the president. It's not Shiko who flew on that particular plane. It's not Shiko who works for the Emiratis and the other guys. No one has actually provided contrary. So rather than have a situation where he said she might, we actually are bantering too much over nothing. And that's why I'm saying that if we were to use the fact sheet, the visit, as a strategy, specifically for the guys in the CSO sector, guys in the private sector, and even people in government who actually are targeting different resources for different projects, we will go rather so far. And you've not looked at how much that particular visit, by the way, affects the region, because a number of the money I'm talking about also goes to the region and goes to the continent. So it's far much more than what we... But then let us not rain down on public participation, I just want to call it public participation. And like I said, public participation is like the gospel. Whether some do it out of spite, they do it out of envy, the gospel is being preached. So that is public participation. We are deepening democracy. And that is actually what we signed up for in 2010. No. So no one should actually take offense when people raise their issues and when the others on the other side actually speak to it. Okay. We are a country that loves dialogue. We speak to each other. And dialogue is difficult. That is why people love to fight. Okay. A lot of times people fight because dialogue is difficult. See how difficult it is on this show.
Trevor, there are always two things you must be very careful with when you're dealing with anyone that supports UDA. Number one, they lie and they lie so good. You know, for Arnold to tell us that the president's trip halfway has brought 15 trillion and he's not pointing to anything. He's not telling you like, okay, there's this project that is going to be 900 million. So when you add to this, it gets to this and it gets to this. They like throwing figures and they think when they throw figures, they scare you and they mesmerize you, you know. I mean, Arnold, it's not good to lie to Kenyans so that maybe people can go home and sit pretty and say, after all, Arnold said there's money that is coming. Where is the money? You know, when you tell me, as a young person, I am going to benefit from this, I also want to benefit. So tell us, which office shall we go to tomorrow, on Monday, and say, there's the money that the president brought, so we have come for it. I mean, those are superfluous lies. And if we have to fix things in this country, we have to start looking at things objectively and accepting that we can get things wrong. The second danger about dealing with UDA funds is that they never want to be questioned. Like they assume a godly position, thou shalt not question. Arnold, we are going to question you, and we are going to question you vehemently until we get the correct answers. We are not going to keep quiet. You will not scare us with 15 trillion and tell us that we cannot now ask about 200 million. We want to know, who are these good friends that supported the president? Because we have other things that need to be done in this country. They can also come through. If they looked at Kenya and they felt the only way we can help the Kenyan president is giving him a luxurious jet to the US, then I think they are not looking at our problems nicely. At the backdrop of that profligate expenditure to the US, people were dying of floods. People were being removed from the places they have lived in Mathare. And while that was happening, other people that live in better places in this city continue to live on the riparian lands. So these hustlers who continue to face the big cane of the UDA government, when are they going to really feel that government that you told them this will be a government for the boda guy, for the mamamboga person? And then we look at the situation in the country right now. Are we in a position where we can boast that we went to the US and we carried a bunch of governors, I don't know, comedians, what have you, and less of policy influencers and less of the people who make decisions and the people who shape things in this country? I mean, looking at that trip, and you are Kenyan and it is 2024, you should be ashamed.
So, Alenga, is the issue here the highlighting of what we got from the trip or the lack of information trickling to the people? Because I'm looking at the website of the White House here, and this is not us. There's a lot that's coming there. Delivery of democracy, $40 million. Supporting independent civil society, $700,000 US. Bringing transparency to the government, and they're quantifying this in real time, and we've written them in dollars. Combating corruption, $500,000 US. This is according to their fact sheet. Getting anti-corruption professionals there. Is it that we don't have the information, or is it, or we don't trust?
Trevor, the thing is, that is a narrative. That's a story. So what is the methodology of getting all this? Like, if my mother is sitting deep down in Vihiga, then he hears the president has come back with 15 trillion. How is it going to get to her? Okay. If you tell me democracy, we have given this much, so what is the method? Okay. You know, how is it coming down? So if this is, I mean, let's also look at the other things that the US committed with the president. The other things like, shipping our police to another country. The other things like, becoming a NATO member. I don't know.
NATO ally.
Yes, all those things. Is this now stuff to close our eyes and stop us from debate? That's the intention of that.
And I'll have to take a break because it's a commercial break. I'll come back. But Josephine has also been quiet for a bit, and then we get into the connection of the finances that you're talking about. I see it's part of this conversation as well. We're back in just a bit. Send in your views as well at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. See you in a bit.